everyone. My name's Michelle with the Book Dragon, and today we've got author Jesse Gibbs with us. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, good morning.
And she's very kindly agreed to be interviewed about her book Girl Hidden, as well as her writing in general. So I'm going to start by asking you, Jesse, can you give our readers a brief overview of what to expect from Girl Hidden?
Yes, there are some trigger warnings in Girl Hidden. It's a really intense book. I tried to bring a lot of levity into some of the awful situations that I grew up with. I started writing this book because when I tell people that I was kidnapped twice as a child and that I was in hiding for 2 years and my mother was a narcissist and my stepfather treated me like his girlfriend in every way possible, they kind of go, wait, what? You you were kidnapped, wait, twice? How in the, you should write a book about this. And so eventually I did. So it started with, I start during the book, I try to get into the mind of my mother at 19 when I was born. I would have been her seventh abortion at 19. So she had 6 pregnancies before me by the time she was 19 years old. And then I have 7 siblings between her and my stepfather, which came several years after me. I was living with my grandmother in Washington State in the United States. And my mother had gotten married and had 2 babies and decided that she wanted to have custody of me again. So she contacted my grandmother and said, can I have my baby back? And my grandmother, knowing my mother, was like, yeah, no, that's not a thing. We're not doing that. You're not a safe person. And so she wrote to her dad, my grandfather, and my grandfather said, basically, I don't really want a hyperactive 5-year-old running around my house. I'm newly retired from the Navy. Maybe this will work out. So they basically, grandpa said, yeah, you can have her back. So my grandmother flew me to North Carolina, dropped me off in the airport with my mother, who I had not met since I was 3, my stepfather, and my 2 little brothers, introduced me, and then got back on a plane. And I didn't see her for almost 2 years. When she finally came down to see me again, um, I told her everything that was going on. I told her that I cooked and cleaned for the entire family, that I took care of the pets, that I took care of my brothers, that I changed diapers, that I took care of my mom, who was basically in bed all of the time, that my parents would come into my bedroom to drop Papa off every night. And grandma was like, oh, this isn't a thing. So my mother's 5'10" and violent. My stepfather is a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps at 6'2". My grandmother was 5 foot nothing and weighed 98 pounds dripping wet.
Mhm.
So we put together a plan to smuggle me out of the house. I ended up back in Washington State and I was there for about 9 months before my mother hunted me. She flew out to Washington with her new best friend, hunted me for 3 days, tracked my movements, waited for my grandparents to take their nightly walk, and dragged me kicking and screaming from my house. They crossed state lines within 3 hours, getting the FBI involved. The next morning, I flew home to North Carolina with 2 FBI agents on the plane trying to track me, but I was dressed as a little boy and flying with her best friend. They lost us in the Atlanta airport. So the story of my life is a growing up on a small, very unhappy farm. Animals, dogs and cats and chickens and things. All of my siblings who I basically raised. And I lived there until I was 19. At 19, I ran away from home and promptly from the fire right into the frying pan. Or from the frying pan right into the fire. Sorry. And ended up at an inner city commune in Chicago, which I thought was very freeing, but the control was still there.
Mhm.
And I lived there for 12 years. I met a man, got married, I was 19, he was 32, and I had already been groomed to care for older men because of Papa.
Mhm.
So it felt really comfortable until it wasn't. And while Leonard was not technically abusive, he was very much not a safe person. I didn't have any rights. I didn't have any freedom. I didn't have any choices that were mine. My entire life was wrapped up in making sure that he was taken care of. Like, I couldn't go out with my friends unless I found a babysitter for him. Like, and then I was punished for days afterwards with withholding of affection, with arguments because I left him for the evening. It was pretty messed up. When I finally left the inner city commune, I found myself in Washington State. That was 15 years ago. I have gotten I've gone to school. I have a degree and I started my own business. I met an amazing, amazing man, and I've continued dancing. I've been a swing dancer since I was 28, much to my ex husband's chagrin. And when I moved out to Washington, I decided to keep it up. So I joined the swing dance community out here and eventually got into blues dance, which is where I met my husband. He was a new guy on the dance floor, and I asked him to dance, and he said yes. And I was kind of won the lottery because he was a really good dancer. And then I asked him to dance again. And then eventually we started talking, and we had this whole conversation of like, okay, what's your baggage? You know, we're grown-ups now. We were both in our 30s. We're not getting into this whole like kids game of like flirting back and forth. Let's have serious talk conversation.
Mhm.
What do you bring to the table and what's your baggage? And for him, he had 4 kids. And I have a mint condition uterus. I was like, four kids. Oh, 4 kids. Interesting. That's fascinating. Now, when I left the inner city commune, the reason that, well, I would say the reason my marriage broke up, but my marriage was well over by several years. I just hadn't pulled the trigger yet. And at the inner city commune, divorce is really frowned upon. There aren't any people that get divorced there. It's if you get divorced, you leave. You
Mhm.
leave your home, you leave your work, you leave every friend that you've known as an adult, and you're basically shunned. So divorce just wasn't an option. And I had gotten to a point in my life where I was trying to figure out a private way to unalive myself. And the only person that I felt saw me was one of my friends that I had known for 11 years at that point. He was my best friend's husband. And we had an affair, which do not recommend. Bad scene all the way around. Oh my God. And so I'm sitting down a year later, year and a half later, with this wonderful, wonderful man that I was very interested in. And I told him, look, this is who I am. These are the choices that I made.
Mhm.
This is why I live out here now and no longer in the inner city commune. And he looked at me, and there wasn't even a full beat. And he goes, Chicago, huh? What brought you to Chicago?
Yeah. So there was no
So
judgment there.
we've been together for 15 years. We have 4 grandbabies. I fell in love 4 times over with his kids. Like, we've been together for 6 months, and I basically told him, like, you realize if we break up, the kids go with me. Like, that's not a thing. So the book has a happily ever after.
Mhm.
It really does. And while there's a lot of trauma involved in it, um, I did try to find magic in all the places that I could.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely comes through. So what was it that made you decide to go ahead and share your story with with the world? You know, you've obviously been through such an amazing experience, but why did you want other people to hear that?
So I started writing my book when I was 20.
Hmm.
Um, And the reason I started writing it is because I felt like I needed to get things down on paper and out of my head. So it started as kind of a journal. As I got older, my grandmother started sending me boxes. And in these boxes were her journals, letters from my mother. I have every letter that my mother wrote to her mother when she was pregnant with me. And after she was pregnant with me, even stating that she wanted to kill me, stating that the doctors were going to take me away from her because she was starving me to death. Um, I have journals from my grandmother, notes from other people, letters from other people. I have the missing child notice. I have all of this paperwork, and I ended up with like 40 boxes when it was all said and done. And every time grandma would send me, she'd send me just one box, and I would go through it and go, "Oh, that's not what happened." Oh, and then I'd have to go back to my journal and go, okay, well, how, all right, resort this. That doesn't work. That doesn't make any sense. Let me get on the phone and see if I can track down these people. And so I spent literally 25 years trying to sort out the experiences that I had, the memory loss that I had, because I lost my memory after the second kidnapping. I was 7, and I literally could only remember, I couldn't remember my grandparents. I couldn't remember my aunties and uncles. The only things that I remembered was the kidnapping. So I knew mama was dangerous, and what my stepfather had done to me. So I knew papa was dangerous. And those are the only memories I had until I was a teenager and started having flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of direction from my mother of what her truth was and what she wanted me to remember. So grandma is an evil, awful person who tried to take you from me. Grandpa is dangerous and beat you repeatedly. Just all of this stuff that wasn't true. And so I would write these things down, and then I would get these boxes and go through them. And so for 20 years, I wrote my story and rewrote my story and tracked down people who were involved and interviewed them to see what their version of events were and how that matched up to this situation.
Mm-hmm.
When it got to the point where I had the full story written, I had about, I think, 120,000 words written. I needed an ending, and then I needed a reason because I really wanted to publish this book. And when it came down to it, the thing that became really important towards the end of writing this book was that I'm not the only person that's gone through something like this. And I wanted it to be a survivor's guide
Mm-hmm.
so that you could read this and realize that, awful things can happen. There's healing, there's freedom. You can be more than just a survivor. You can thrive. And I wanted it to sort of help people be encouraged that there's more, especially when you're in that dark situation. You literally can't see that there was ever a light to begin with. And I just wanted people to have the opportunity to know that there really is light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And when I published my book, I literally, to this day, I probably get 3 people a week that contact me and go, "Oh my God, I just finished your book. I have to tell you my story."
Mm-hmm.
Men, women, theys, thems, the group will tell me their story and their trauma and what they went through and how encouraging it is to know that they're not alone.
That's a very important reason to have shared it then, that you've made that connection with those other people. And as you said, they realize they're not alone.
It's very powerful. It's hard. Like, it's a hard thing to
Yeah.
carry, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, it's really makes me feel like I did the right thing.
Yeah, definitely. So, do your family know that you've published Girl Hidden Jessie? And if so, how did they react to it?
Um, so before I published it, and I was getting to the point where I was like, we were down to the editing phase.
Mm-hmm.
So I have 7 siblings, and I contacted each of them and said, I'm writing this book. This is my story. And I worked really hard to not have their story, like, they're involved in my stories, but I didn't want to tell their story. I wanted to tell my story. That's their story to tell, their trauma, their experiences, their magic that they found, how they got out, all of that. That's their story. But you're going to be in the book, and I'm going to publish it. Do you have any questions?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you want me to do? So all the names are changed to protect the guilty, assuage the innocent,
Mm-hmm.
and, make the grumpy go away. At that point in time, both my mother and my stepfather were still alive. Papa passed away last year. And they were all for it. All of them were like, yeah, do it. Go for it. I believe in you. Do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
My two youngest siblings at the time didn't really know everything that had gone on. And Papa did a really good job of being the good guy. He was the one that he was the safe parent because Mama was volatile.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a TikTok about, I don't know, 6 months ago. And I started posting like, hey, this is part of my story. Here's, a clip from the book. Here's, the thing that I'm doing today that I'm walking through. And my two youngest siblings kind of had to take a step back because they didn't know. And Papa's not there to defend himself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So they still have a very childlike view of their safe parent. And so they've kind of pulled away a little bit, which is really sad.
Yeah.
And they'll come around. They'll come back around. It'll happen. But yeah, it was really hard to tell my siblings. And when it came out, when I finally, so my youngest brother, so it's 4 boys and the 3 girls after me. So my youngest brother had gotten married, had a couple of babies, and then he had a little girl. And he had decided that he wanted to start getting back in relationship with Papa.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, this is the line.
Yeah.
This is where the line is. You don't need to bring my niece over to hang out with Papa. He likes little girls. This is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat down with my siblings and I was like, this is what happened. I know, like, I hope this didn't happen to my sisters, but you guys need to know that this is what happened. And there was like a moment, and my oldest brother Luke goes, huh, Mama said you would say that to hurt her and hurt Papa.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really? Oh, I see. So she gaslit me 20 years ago. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. So do, do you think I'm making this up?
Mm-hmm.
And they sat there for a minute and they were like, no, it sucks. It really sucks to look at Papa this way. And we're going to have to sit in that. And it really sucks that Mama tried to basically set you up to be the bad guy instead of knowing that the situation happened and protecting us.
Yeah.
None of them have read it at this point,
Mm-hmm.
but they have a vague idea of what the story's about, but none of them have read it. I think that it's pretty traumatizing to
Yeah.
relive those experiences.
Yeah, understandably. And
Yeah.
if readers of Girl Hidden could take any message away from the book, what would you like that to be, Jesse?
You can survive.
Mm-hmm.
You can survive. There are ways. And sometimes anger is a saving grace. Sometimes being mad is better than being scared. If you have the opportunity, talk to someone, tell them what's going on, and tell your story. These kinds of experiences happen all the time. I'm not an outlier. I'm not an outlier,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't talk about it. And it's important because if I talk about it and I'm getting all of these stories where people have never told their story before, and I've literally had several people that are like, maybe I should write a book. And they're telling me their story. And I'm like, yo, you should. Yeah, absolutely should. So tell your story, talk about it, and remember that you're more than your experiences.
So, what would your advice be to anyone who was considering writing a memoir?
Oh my God, do it. Do it. It's the best therapy. It is the best therapy. Put it down on paper. Don't worry about organizing it. Don't worry about like, well, is this going to go with this chapter? Don't worry about it. Just whatever story is in your head, put it down on paper. You can organize it later. That's what editors are for. Put it down on paper. Write whatever it is you're feeling. If you're walking through something, you're in therapy, you have this conversation, you come home, you have this whole memory that just like popped up, write it down. Write it down. It's good therapy. It gets it out. It's like getting the pus out of a wound. It's so healthy. And organize it later. Decide whether or not it needs to be a book whenever you're done.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that amazing interview. You obviously shared a lot of your experiences there, Jesse, and I'm sure it will help a lot of our viewers. And if you'd like to meet Jessie in person, you can do so between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. tomorrow at 6 West Row and Stockton-on-Tees at the Book Dragon shop. And she'd be happy to sign some copies of Girl Hidden, which is the book she's been talking about today. You can take away your own signed copy, get your photo taken with her if you'd like to.
Yes, come see
me. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jessie. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'll see you all tomorrow.
I'll see you then.